Hey, it's Drybear. Dragonflight Season 1, Week 4 is coming to a close, so it's time to rank all of the classes in the game based on their performance in PvE. I've already done a ranking for DPS and tanks. You'll find that down below in the description. But now let's talk about the healers and how they stack up against each other. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. So here we are with Week 4 healer rankings. This is where everything has been. There's not really too much surprising in here. I'll give the caveat, the same caveat we gave for tanks, and that the only real way to rank healers is with HPS and performance, but that's not always a best measurement because managing mana is a big part of it. Some healers like Holy Paladin bring more than just HPS. There's also different roles. There's tank healers and spot healers, which focus on preventing individuals from dying. And then there's raid healers that focus on raising the overall health pool of the entire raid. And then in Mythic Plus, there's different requirements for that. But that's why we have different categories here. I've tried to take the highest percentile parses to show at least the best players playing the healers in all scenarios, so that it tries to weed out some of the gunk in there. But just know that healer and tank rankings are always a little bit estimated, because it can't be perfectly measured how well a healer is bringing it together. But we look at trends, we look at different categories, and it's why I stack all of the performances and categories together so we can see trends and see how the classes are performing. So at the very top for all three categories stacked together of Heroic Raid, Mythic Raid, and Mythic Plus, no surprise here, Resto Druid takes the first slot. They've kind of been in this eternal struggle with Preservation Evoker, but they've recently, and I think with gear, as haste gets higher and you have better usage of those hots and people get better as well, you end up having Resto Druid take the spot. So for Heroic Raid, Restoration Druid absolutely slays. So when difficulty is no longer a question, you just get to kind of run wild in Heroic Raid. Resto Druid just outperforms everybody. Their healing performance is absolutely nuts. When you go into Mythic Raid, where the difficulty is higher, Preservation Evoker and Resto Druid are just about tied, but Preservation Evoker takes a very small, slight lead in Mythic Raid. And it could be that in Mythic Raid, it's a 20-man group of people coordinated. If you're stacking well together, maybe you can use your empowered spells to better effect. It's easier to line up your empowered spells, and that you can also get some really clean options that use your rewind and your reversion stacks and things like that. Whereas with Resto Druid, it's kind of about the same as far as difficulty goes. And when we go over into Mythic Plus, Resto Druid takes the higher bit here. In general, Resto Druid has always been very good at Mythic Plus, just because you're able to place hots in high movement encounters, Ruby Life pools, all these encounters in not good offensive. There's a lot of movement involved and constant ticking damage, and Resto Druid has always been super great at that. But they also score better because they have Battle Res, they have Stampeding Roar, they're able to tank hits a lot better because they can go into bear form and use self frenzied regeneration, things like that. It just makes them a lot more viable when it comes to Mythic Plus. So in Mythic Plus, Resto Druid takes the spot. Preservation noticeably behind Resto Druid and Mythic Plus, and this is why Restoration Druid takes the top. But Preservation Evoker is very close behind. So when you look at the graphs on the right of all categories stacked, there's almost three groupings, right? There's the top two, Restoration Druid and Preservation Evoker, which are just absolutely insane. Then there's the middle grouping of Holy Paladin, Holy Priest, and Restoration Shaman. And then there's the sad boys down at the bottom, Mistweaver and Discipline Priest. So moving on from the top grouping, we have the middle grouping of Holy Paladin, Holy Priest, and Restoration Shaman. When it comes to Heroic Raid, where difficulty is less of a question, Holy Priest outperforms Holy Paladin and Restoration Shaman significantly. If you're just allowed to heal however much you want, whenever you want, and you don't really have to worry about mechanics or doing everything perfectly in Heroic Raid, Holy Priest slays that grouping. However, when you push into higher difficulties where there's more being asked of the individual player, Holy Paladin takes that spot. So Holy Paladin outperforming Holy Priest and Restoration Shaman in Mythic Raid and in Mythic Plus. and in the middle spot is Holy Priest. And then at the bottom of all these is Restoration Shaman. So Restoration Shaman kind of takes the bottom for Heroic Raid, Mythic Raid, and Mythic Plus of that middle grouping. So they're basically always in that 5th slot in every single type of content. And partially because there's the bottom 2 are so far away from everyone else that they kind of have that buffer zone, right? So going down into the bottom slot, we have Mistweaver and Discipline Priest fighting for the slot. And the big difference here is just Raid versus Mythic Plus. In Raid, Mistweaver does just fine, honestly. I would say that they are generally quite good. They are able to put out a lot. There's more required of them because you have to Fistweave right now, and that does have extra steps in it versus like a Resto Druid or a Preservation Evoker where you can just kind of do your thing at range and stand where you want to stand, and some fights are better than others. But Mistweaver does have decent healing. They are getting a nice buff on Tuesday. They are also buffing Holy Priest rather than Disc Priest, which kind of shocked me, but maybe there's more coming for Disc. I'm not sure why they're kind of being left down there at the bottom. Mistweaver, however, loses to Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus. This is something that I've been talking about ever since I started doing guides for the healers in Mythic Plus, is that Mistweaver is easily the worst and is a standout, and I play all 7 of them in all content. So I could definitely tell you, at least from my experience, that Mistweaver is the one that struggles the most in Mythic Plus. And then in Raid, Discipline is the bottom just across the board for Mythic and for Heroic. Discipline, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think that Discipline Priest has an amazing kit. One of the better ones they've had in the last few expansions. Spirit Shell was fun, but that one's gone, and I think the kit they have now is super fun. They have a shadow damage build, they have a regular build, they have new ways to apply and keep up their atonement, which is more fun than just spamming 5 bubbles and then doing damage. They have like more flexibility with that, which is cool. I think their biggest problem for Discipline is just raw throughput. I think they just don't do enough numbers. They need more numbers. Either they need to deal more damage or they need to transfer more through the atonement, or both, to be able to get some more healing out of that, or maybe just give some more base healing to Radiance or something like that. But either way, I think they're just not, when played really well, and you can see that with Mythic Raid and with Mythic Plus, in the high difficulties, when played well, they still aren't putting out as much healing and performing as well as the other specs on the list. So that is the overall ranking for the healers in week 4. Restoration Druid, Preservation Evoker in the top 2 spots, pretty close together. Holy Paladin, Holy Priest are probably really fighting for that 3rd and 4th. Restoration Shaman is kind of on its own in the 5th slot, not really competing with anyone else. And then Mistweaver and Discipline are in an internal struggle to be the worst, at least in week 4. But some buffs coming in week 5, so we'll see how that applies. We'll check back in next week to see where that lines up. If you have any comments on this, let me know. If you're playing any of these, do you notice that Discipline and Mistweaver are below the rest? Do you play Restoration Shaman and you still top the meters and you're the last healer alive and you are there for every successful kill and you do just fine in Mythic Plus? How do you feel? Like, who do you think is better, Holy Paladin, Holy Priest? Overall, on performance in general, it seems like as difficulty goes higher, Holy Paladin does better, but Holy Priest has always had that problem of dying. I call them the toilet paper priest because they don't have the damage reduction or survivability that Discipline has. They're just a roll of toilet paper with great healing, and if they make one wrong mistake and they clip the edge of something, they just die, and that can affect their performance significantly, especially in Mythic Plus where you have to move around a lot and you have a lot of stand-in fight heals. And then how do you feel about Restoration Druid and Preservation sitting on their high horse? How long do you think that's going to last? It's been that way since the season started, but I guess we'll see. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.